back to another video in my ongoing series? Is this a series now? Anyway, in my ongoing series about the universe of the Elder Scrolls. In this rather complex case, we'll be exploring if the Elder Scrolls is really polytheistic, as many sources claim. But first, some explanation. The nature of worship in the Elder Scrolls universe is a complex and multifaceted subject, and it varies significantly between different cultures and races. The very existence of gods, or what we would call gods, is even up for debate. The existence of the Daedra is pretty apparent due to their direct interaction with mortals, but calling them gods might get me killed by a Vigilant of Stendarr, so... Now, the Aedra are more elusive and harder to prove. This ambiguity extends to our main thesis, or rather a modified version of it. But first, let's talk about the types of theism. This may sound boring, but it'll be essential for answering our question. Now, there are many types and varieties of theistic belief throughout human culture, with nuance being added on to even well-known and seemingly straightforward beliefs. But there are some main types. Monotheism is the belief and worship of only one god, denying the existence of others. Think Islam. Polytheism is the belief in many gods and worship of multiple. Think ancient modern paganism, which also just so happens to be my camp. There's also some more specific categories. Dualism is the belief in two opposing divine forces, usually some form of good and evil. This is most prominent in Zoroastrianism, but it tends to present as a nuance in many other religions, like how traditional Christianity tends to be much more monotheistic, with dualistic elements. Henotheism is the belief in many gods, but worship of a single patron god. This is prominent in certain forms of Hinduism. With that out of the way, let's refine our original question. Is worship in the Elder Scrolls predominantly polytheistic, worshipping multiple gods, or henotheistic, worshipping one god while acknowledging the existence of others? To answer this question, let's look at the cultures of Tamriel and how they fit into these definitions. The Imperials are obviously based off of the ancient Romans. I mean, legates, gladii, Romanesque names, but the religion is not as based on the Romans, at least as presented in the games. Imperial culture leans towards henotheism, with individuals typically choosing a patron deity based on their occupation or personal circumstances. For instance, a soldier might venerate Talos, while a merchant might favor Zenithar. This practice of focusing on a single deity while acknowledging others reflects a henotheistic approach. This makes sense for how the Empire works, and reflects historical examples of what keeps empires together. It has been found that empires that are monotheistic tend to be more centralized and unitary than polytheistic empires. This explains many of the reasons that nobles of pagan societies like Rome would adopt a monotheistic religion like Christianity. This likely coincidental fact just adds more reason to believe that the empire is henotheistic, rather than fully polytheistic. Not to mention the Church of the One, of course. Other human groups tend to also have many of the same characteristics, so I'll be grouping them in with Imperials. Sorry, Nords. In contrast, Khajiit and Western Elven cultures, so just Elven cultures, I guess, exhibit a more polytheistic tendency. They worship a pantheon of gods and ancestors, each associated with specific domains or aspects of life. This reverence for multiple deities aligns with a polytheistic framework. This also makes sense given the inspiration. The Khajiit are based on the Romani and a general Indian synthesis. This might seem to point to henotheism or even monotheism, but a look at ancient Hinduism provides an answer. Hinduism was originally a fairly one-of-the-mill pagan religion, meaning it was polytheistic and worshipped many archetypal gods of the Proto-Indo-Europeans. Khajiit religion seems to reflect this earlier stage of Hinduism. Western Elven cultures vary in inspiration, but overall have a tendency towards ancestor worship, which, wouldn't you know it, is something common to polytheism. Argonians, with their devotion to the Hist, represent a unique case. While technically monotheistic due to their singular focus on the Hist, their conception of the Hist as a collective entity with distinct aspects could also be interpreted as a form of henotheism. Think about forms of Christianity with the Trinity, one God but three aspects. For a more polytheistic lens, think about concepts like the Morrigan in Celtic paganism and our good old Maiden Mother Crone. Argonians, of course, have diversity. Many worship Sithis, but this is yet more evidence of henotheism, just in a more cultic, no, not that kind of cult, sense. The Dunmer, or Dark Elves, present a blend of polytheistic and henotheistic elements. While certain families or groups may be associated with specific deities, individual worshippers often focus on a single god, such as Lady Azura. excuse me, the combination of broader cultural polytheism with individual henotheism adds another layer of complexity to the religious landscape. This feels very much like ancient Hellenism, with cults of different gods, but a general emphasis on polytheism. The social stratification within different cultures also seems to influence worship practices. In some cases, the nobility might engage in elaborate and inclusive forms of worship, encompassing a wider pantheon of deities, while the common people might focus on specific gods relevant to their daily lives. This disparity reflects the interplay between social hierarchy and religious expression. The tribunal and the associated practices therein introduce further complexity. This veneration of three deified mortals represents a distinct form of worship that deviates from traditional polytheistic or even henotheistic models. This is inspired by Aleister Crowley and Thelema more than any classical faith, with a helping of theosophy too, ascended masters and such. Overall, the Elder Scrolls universe presents a rich tapestry of religious practices, encompassing polytheism, henotheism, and even monotheism. Looking at you, Skull. The specific form of worship varies among different cultures, social classes, and individual preferences. This diversity reflects the complexity of real-world religious practices, and adds depth and nuance to the game's world-building. Hopefully this video taught you something about religious studies and how humans classify religion. This was inspired by Religion for Breakfast and their exploration of the Zelda games and Hylian religion. If there do happen to be any religious studies majors in the audience, feel free to add context and correct me where I was most probably wrong. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and a comment. If you really enjoyed it, consider subscribing for more of this, whatever this is. See you next time, and may Akatosh watch over you.